Welcome guys to another recap from us again. Today we'll be bringing you a slice of action fantasy anime. You guessed it right, it's an epic fantasy animation based on the online video game Dota 2, Dragon's Blood. So sit back and let's take you on this thrilling and adventurous journey. In the beginning there was only the primordial mind, and when chaos sprouted across the mind, the stars were formed and the creation thereafter. However, a demon in his prison in Falfell, Terrorblade, we'll call him Terrorblade, the Terrible, found truth in this chaos and sought to remake creation in his own Inferno image. Presently, we see our famous Dragon Knight, Davian the Dragon Knight, rustling a big, old and smelly dragon, terrorizing the people. Davian the brave and strong follows the beast deep under the ground and slays it there. The rest of his colleagues assist him in dismembering the parts of the dragon. In doing so, they come across a massive hole dug by an elder dragon, an Eldworm. Davian's captain wished they would go down and kill the big one, but Davian refused. The guy wanted to celebrate that he was still breathing. Davian rides back to the village and carries the dragon's head in victory. As a dragon knight, his beer was free. In the bar celebrating, he meets Miranda and her best friend Marcy, who were on a quest to recover their stolen lotus flowers. Meanwhile, right outside, the captain is totally drunk. Terrorblade the Terrible used the opportunity to attack the captain's insecurities as a worthless dragon knight and a joke of the town. The captain freaks out at his own reflected personality, thereby making Terrorblade the Terrible take control of his mind. The next morning, Davian's most trustworthy and loyal friend, Bram, alerts him of their captain's journey to wake up the Eldworm. Davian curses at their foolish captain, knowing not one man nor 20 could stand up against an Eldworm. He rushed to the foothills to stop his captain. Getting there, he ran into Terrorblade the Terrible, possessing the Eldworm dragon. Slirak, another Eldworm dragon and the Father of Fire, emerges and battles Terrorblade the Terrible. Slirak gets help from Davian and they kill the Eldworm dragon. However, Slirak suffered lethal injuries from the fight, and on his deathbed, he sliced Davian's throat for some reason, uttering the last words, "Forgive me, little mouse." Our Davian is left dead afterwards. Subsequently, Miranda and Marcy find Davian naked in the middle of nowhere and without memories of what happened prior. They camp and take him along to recover their stolen lotuses in another town. Being a dragon knight of respectable status and fairly popular, Davian is able to accommodate them for the time being. A friend of his owns a tavern and they rest there. The following day, Davian is feeling very sick. He vomits and coughs up a ring, which happened to be recognized by a thug as a property of a dead friend found torn to pieces with dragon armor beside the dead body. The both of them get into a physical fight. Davian wins and the thug scurries out of the inn, promising to come back with backup the day after. After that, Davian passes out. Waking up from the voices of Terrorblade the Terrible, the innkeeper tells him the girls had already set off to find their lotuses in a black market. Meanwhile, they were actually getting set up and thrown into cells to be used as slaves. But that doesn't last long. Marcy has an incredible amount of strength. She beat the crap out of all the buff men. They meet up with Davian and ask him to join them as they travel the Broken Peaks to meet the Invoker. Davian stubbornly refuses and stays behind to fight the thugs, because he never runs from a fight. When the thugs arrive, they surround Davian and attack simultaneously, even managing to drive a sword through him. Well, it doesn't end there. Just when they begin to laugh about his death, Davian transforms into a half-man, half-dragon and rips them all apart. Unfortunately, Davian transforms back when he sees his reflection and becomes afraid of what he's done. The girls quickly rush to save him before the arrival of the city guards. Davian wants a ride to the Dragonhold where his brothers could possibly help him. While Miranda's destination was the Broken Peaks, where the shopkeeper ordered them to see the Invoker, the same route to Davian's Dragonhold, so they journey together. On the other hand, we're introduced to 4 related elves. One of them was the thief Femrim, who stole Miranda's lotuses from the Night Silver Woods. Her plan was to take the lotuses to the Invoker in the Broken Peaks, and he would raise the lotuses up and revive their goddess Mene. Meanwhile, on their journey, Miranda gets separated from Davian after a sudden earthquake in the mountains. Femrim and her siblings approach the Broken Peak hidden in the mountains. They enter the tower and Femrim meets a mage, aka the Invoker. He takes the possession of the lotuses and tells her the story of her goddess was only a tale and he couldn't do anything more than that, nor revive the dead. He called her a thief and teleported her home. Meanwhile, Miranda stumbles upon a cave that housed a strange stone that turns people to eat on themselves. She's very close to losing her sanity, but a strange feminine voice pulls her back to reality. The zombies noticed her presence and fought for her flesh. However, she fights her way out of the cave and is reunited with Davian, who helps her escape. Femrim and her siblings are ambushed by a warrior from the Night Silver Woods, Luna. in order to retrieve the stolen lotuses. She kills Fenrim's siblings and is just about to kill Fenrim when the Invoker pulls her to safety. With the anger and dissatisfaction in his eyes, he promises to rewrite the old stories with Fenrim. Somewhere deep in the mountains, a powerful Dragon Knight kills a full adult dragon all by himself and leaves its trail of blood as he pulls it away. Davian makes it to the dragon hold with Morana and Marcy, but none of his brothers were present. Just as he was about to settle in, the Dragon Knight pulling the adult dragon showed up. His name was Caden, one of the most powerful dragon hunters ever. When Davian has a conversation with Caden, something in Davian makes him enraged as he watches Caden open up the guts of the dead dragon, so he leaves. However, Caden noticed this. Later when they have dinner, Caden reveals to them the main purpose of his quest, to find Slirak the dragon and slay him. 20 years ago, Slirak murdered 29 of his brothers. Only he survived and he vowed to kill the beast, and he's been preparing for it for the past 20 years. Davian explained to him when he last saw Slirak, and Caden promised to help out a brother. However, when they all go to bed, Caden abducts Davian while he sleeps. He takes him under the hold and tortures Davian while commanding Slirak to show himself. Davian transforms into Slirak and a fierce battle breaks out between the man and the dragon. Caden proved to be a very skillful fighter and fully prepared for Slirak. Their fight breaks outside the dragon hold, and from the looks of it, Slirak barely escapes alive and takes Morana and Marcy with him. Meanwhile, the Invoker travels in an astral form to meet Selimine, goddess of the moon and queen of the Night Silver Woods. Their conversation tells us they were both engaged 1,000 years ago, and they've even had a daughter. The Invoker warns Selimine her time was over, and elves from around the world worship the myths of another goddess of the moon, Mene, and they even united and formed a secret alliance that would rise against her, and she was not in his favour. Selimine gets angry after hearing this and ends their meeting. She goes outside with annoyance and sends her Dark Moon army led by Luna to destroy the elves who rose against her and worshipped another goddess. She orders Luna to bring the remaining elves to worship her, after declaring war upon the Enclaves, which were the villages of the elves. Meanwhile, Davian is summoned to the Pillars of Creation, the 7 Dragons of Creation meeting. However, they are surprised to see Davian instead of Slirak, the Father of Fire. They question how Davian's presence was possible while outside Slirak was injured and in pain. Slirak was hungry and insane. He chased Morana and Marcy to feed on them. Davian knows Slirak would kill them, so he begged the other dragons to let him free and bring Slirak back in so he doesn't eat Morana. After a long hide-and-seek game between Slirak and Morana, Marcy heads to the Invoker's Tower and Morana acts as a diversion. Despite Davian's explanation and his fear for Terrorblade the Terrible, the dragons still choose to kill him to resurrect Slirak, so Slirak could explain to them how it was possible. Instead, Slirak appears from the shadows and refuses his rebirth. Morana made her way to the dragon's back and struck his wound. The pain causes Slirak to crash to the ground. Preparing to eat Morana, she calls out Davian. Slirak reforms back into Davian. Morana sustains injury and slumps to the ground. Davian rushes to meet her. She gives him a stone and he locates the Invoker's tower. Davian takes her to the Invoker and asks for his help. In Enclaves, Selimine's armies rain destruction upon them. They are marked with her crescent moon and forced to worship her. Davian wakes up and goes to the Invoker to ask for help concerning his instability and Terrorblade the Terrible. The Invoker explained the 7 pillars of creation, which were the dragons, and with the 7 souls of creation, Terrorblade the Terrible could remake the world to his own horrifying desires. He imbues Davian's necklace with a spell that would prevent transformation for now, but one day Slirak would go mad and Davian would die. Morana wakes up Davian and he's very happy to see her. The Invoker tells them Selimine has waged war upon the Enclaves and slaughtered many of those who do not worship her. Morana thinks she's lying because rumour says that he's the devil of the moon. However, he cares less and bargains with them to take the lotuses back to Selimine and restore peace. He leaves them to ponder about this proposal. Morana finds comfort in Davian's embrace and they share a moment together. Meanwhile, Luna is striking horrifying deaths to the elves, who she thought rebelled against her goddess. She successfully captured the leader of the enclave Fenrim came from. The Invoker gives Morana the lotuses safe inside a box imbued with his magic. Only when Selimine accepts his bargain to end the war and let peace reign with the box open. He hopes peace reigns and sends them away. He also sends Fenrim as a guide, but instructs her to bring the Dragon Knight back to him after their journey. After their leave, the Invoker wakes up a sleeping Elderworm dragon and contains it with his magic. The battle drains much of his life and leaves him like an old man. In his sadness, he remembers his past with his late daughter. Meanwhile, Fenrim leads Davian and Morana to a village. During their travel, Davian spends time with Fenrir more than Mirana. Mirana gets a little bit jealous. When Davian is consoling Fenrir for losing her siblings, Mirana chimes in, blaming Fenrir for the cause of the war when she stole the lotuses and warning Davian to feel less pity for her. Fenrir gets upset and leaves the party. The next morning she stole the lotuses and she's chased by a group of air dragons. Davian is forced to rush to her rescue and convinces her to let go of the lotuses to secure her escape. She agrees after a while of contemplating and hands over the lotuses to Davian. She uses her shadow teleportation abilities to elude the dragons. When the dragons came closer to Davian, fear immediately struck their cold hearts when they saw the reflection of Slirak, the father of fire, within the eyes of Davian. They flew as far as they could away from Davian. Davian approaches the outside of the cave and Mirana runs to meet him. He confesses to her he was dying. The story goes back to 1,000 years ago. The Invoker lived happily with his daughter Philomena. However, the girl had an incurable disease. Her father studied every book, consulted every schooler, and even used several healing spells, but nothing worked. So desperate, he went to his wife Selimine, who is in fact a goddess then. Selimine refused to help him if he didn't devote himself to her and worship her. With his daughter's life at stake, only a goddess could heal her. He surrendered his ego and begged for her healing. Selimine did the same for her daughter. Philomena, however, refused to worship her. The child wanted her mother's love and not a goddess to worship. Selimine doesn't help the Invoker. She leaves him begging for her help pitifully. Present day, we see the Invoker with immense hatred. He regains his immortality and draws the dragon soul close to him. Davian and the rest reach the enclaves to return the lotuses. Davian says his last goodbye to Mirana. She gives him an option to stay, but he refuses. They rub lips and Davian leaves after. That night, Mirana takes the lotuses to Luna, who then offers it back to their goddess. The box opened and a strange power engulfed the lotuses. It blasted into the night skies, turning the night into blood and preventing the moonlight from reaching everyone. No one is able to feel the goddess's presence now the moon was blocked. A war breaks out as the enclaves find out the goddess is not with them anymore. Meanwhile, Terrorblade the Terrible manifests his body through the flesh of an old woman in the Night Silver Woods. The goddess appears to him and strikes him from above. Davian sees the blood moon and quickly runs back to Mirana. Getting into the village, he was enveloped in flames. Fenrir goes to settle the scores with Luna. She manages to injure her severely. Davian turns into Slirak's humanoid form and sends the elves packing in the air. Selimine battles Terrorblade the Terrible. He scorns her for failing her daughter. Selimine knows the Invoker brought Terrorblade to torment her. However, Terrorblade says that he's only struck a bargain with the Invoker. 1 soul for 7 souls. Her soul for 7 souls. Terrorblade the Terrible defeats Selimine the goddess. Davian, on the other hand, is captured by Kaidan and a group of dragon knights. However, this time, Kaidan isn't here to fight Slirak, he wants to save Davian. Mirana uses the opening Davian paved for her to escape the battle. She rescues Luna and they flee immediately. When we thought the battle was over, it turned out to be the beginning of the end. Stay with us as we recap Book 2 of the anime anytime from now.